Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome to the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0. I'm the Maestro Kevin Crane. Going solo this week, holidays, concerts, things kind of messed up our taping schedule, so Dave could not make it this week. But I will do my best to keep this ship sailing on through the night. Technically the morning, because of course, the weekend edition always hits Saturday morning to help you get through your hangover from Friday. In this case, Black Friday. So between Thursday and the tryptophan, Friday and the shopping, and then all the alcohol you probably had to consume to lower your stress level, Sports Frenzy is always here for you Saturday morning to give you your recommendations, what you can listen to, what you can watch to get you through the rest of the weekend. Taping right now on Thanksgiving, the 24th of November. This will hit Saturday morning, the 26th. As always, we start off with music. And we have got a review of the new Nickelback album for you to start off. Get Rollin'. So let's go ahead and get rolling. The leadoff track on Get Rollin' is the first single that we've reviewed already here on the weekend edition, San Quentin. Turns out it's the best song on the album. One of the few straight ahead rockers. Kind of worried with Nickelback, as so many other bands. Seems like as they get older, they're losing a little bit of their edge. They seem to be dialing it down in terms of the harder stuff. So that should give you a little bit of a preview of how this review is going to go. The 11 tracks on the regular edition. A lot of mid-tempo stuff. Yes, you've got the cheesy power ballad that I'm not a fan of for most bands, and that includes Nickelback. But at least you get a good 1-2 punch to start off. Get Rollin', San Quentin, and Skinny Little Missy. Arguably the two best songs on the album, and really the only two, to me, really good solid rockers on the album. Now, when I talk about all the mid-tempo stuff, you got, again, the generic power ballad, Does Heaven Even Know You're Missing? Which I could definitely do without. The worst song on the album, shocker. Now, there are some good mid-tempo songs on Get Rollin'. Two in particular I really liked. Tidal Wave, even though it gets a little bit repetitive with the chorus over and over and over again, a little bit too much towards the end. Tidal Wave is a really good, catchy mid-tempo song, as is Steel Still Rusts. So again, it's not, I'm probably framing this in more of a negative light than I mean to when it comes to the latest Nickelback album. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not one of their best. Now, there is a bonus edition out there. Like I said, I'm going to give this review and Frenzy score based on the regular edition. There is a deluxe edition that has 4 bonus tracks, but they're all acoustic versions of tracks on the regular edition. So, like we did with Sammy Hagar and The Circle and Crazy Times, that deluxe edition featured other songs, new tracks, not just acoustic versions. So that's why, in that case, we went ahead and reviewed the deluxe edition. Here, we're just going to stick with the 11 songs on the regular edition. Of course, the second single off of Get Rollin' was Those Days, another song we've talked about here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. it seems like all they were trying to do here was create Photograph 2.0. So in that sense, I really am a little bit upset with those days because it seems like lazy songwriting. Again, not as bad as Does Heaven Even Know You're Missing, but pretty bad nonetheless. Then the rest of the songs just kind of are there. High Times moderately catchy, even though it's just a blatantly obvious wink wink singing about marijuana. Vegas Bomb is one of the few other rockers on the album, and I just didn't like the chorus, the chanting. It's just too unwieldy. It's too much. You have to listen to the song to really understand what I'm saying, but they run through this party chant in the chorus, and it's partially garbled, it's partially too much, too fast. Let's put it this way. It's the antithesis of we will rock you. That should be the model that all bands strive for when it comes to one of those party anthem choruses in their songs. So again, wrapping up my review here of Get Rollin', I'll give it 2.5 frenzies. Like I said, not a bad album, but just a little bit disappointing. Really a little bit disappointing. Wanted a little bit more in terms of the rock and stuff. And of course, we all know that everybody hates Nickelback, so my mediocre review of Get Rollin' should please all the haters out there. Now, I remember last week we promised you we were going to review The Offspring's Christmas song, Bells Will Be Ringing. Going to go ahead and save that for a week or two. I think we're going to have some Christmas rock and roll in one of our upcoming episodes, so we'll kind of push The Offspring back to fit in with that theme. So that leaves us with the second single from Godsmack's upcoming new album, Lighting Up the Sky. Second single is You and I. And I'll tell you, it is much, much better than Surrender, in my opinion, the first single. You and I is a little bit more grungy, has a little bit grunge 70s kind of feel to it, a hybrid feel to it, in my opinion. And I love it. I think it's great. It's probably the best song I've heard from Godsmack in a long time. Now, it's not up to the standards of the classics from their first few albums, but kind of hard to top Voodoo, let's put it that way. If they ever do, good for them. But You and I is a massive, not lumbering, not overbearing song. I don't want to call it mid-tempo either, but it's kind of in between heavy and mid-tempo. Catchy guitar riff. Of course, Sully Erna's vocals are solid. I will give You and I a strong 3 frenzies. Like I said, much better than Surrender, the initial single. So I'm really starting to look forward to the new Godsmack album. Well, I was going to be anyway, but really, really looking forward to hearing Lighting Up the Sky at the beginning of 2023. So that's what you get for the music segment this week. A little bit abbreviated, I know, but number one, I don't have Dave's opinions here to put forth, so that's going to shorten things up. And as we've said the last couple weeks, as you get towards the holiday season and the end of the year, you don't get a lot of new music. This Nickelback album that just came out, Get Rollin', is probably going to be the last of brand new studio releases that we get until February of next year. And that's typical of the end of the year. Of course, now what you start to see all the the rock and roll websites and publications putting out their best of lists. And eventually Dave and I will put together our best of for albums and songs of 2022. So for next week, still not 100% sure on how taping schedule is going to work for that. You might have to deal with me solo one more week because we have got another concert that could mess up next week's taping. That would be Steel Panther. Of course, the week after, we'll have a full review for you of that show. Next week, we will have a review of this lost track from The Doors that just came out. If you haven't heard the legend of Paris Blues has got an incredible story behind it involving, I believe it's Ray Manzarek's son, and how he was playing around with the tape deck, and the master tape of Paris Blues was in there, and he started fiddling with all the buttons and hit record, and so it kind of got chopped up, and his son's, talking and gurgling and noises are interspersed in the only master copy supposedly that there was. So they held off for a long, long time on messing around with it, but they have reconstructed the song. So next week, here on Sports Frenzy, the weekend edition, we will have a review of The Doors, Paris Blues. That's probably a good time since we've got a little bit of time here to remind you that obviously you found us somewhere, but you have options. You can find Sports Frenzy 2.0, whether it be the weekend edition or our regular Thursday morning sports edition, on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon, and Audible. And of course, check out our Facebook page where you'll always find links to each and every Sports Frenzy episode. Well, as I said, short but sweet for your first segment, rock and roll. Next up, movies. I'm going to talk about Jordan Peele's new movie that was just recently in theaters, now exclusively streaming on Peacock. Nope is our featured review for the week. Hang out through a quick promo, and I'll be right back with a review of Nope and some fun, interesting, even sad movie news. Be right back, kids.
Hello, this is Will Smith. You might know me as the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You might also know me from Bad Boys 1, Bad Boys 2, and Bad Boys for Life. And now you must also know me as an Academy Award-winning actor for King Richard. Also by now, you know there are two things I do not like people talking about in my presence. Namely, my open marriage and my wife's lack of hair. Well, now there is a third thing you do not talk about in front of Will Smith. You do not talk about Sports Frenzy 2.0. My boys Kevin Dave will hit slap the sports world in Hollywood each and every week on Sports Frenzy 2.0 and the weekend edition on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, and Stitcher. Just remember, keep Sports Frenzy's name out your damn mouth.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the weekend edition, Sports Frenzy 2.0. This is hitting Saturday morning, November the 26th, 2022. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving and you survived Black Friday. Segment 2, we're going to talk about movies. One featured review this week. Dave will play catch up. He's not here this week, obviously. So he's going to have to give you his review later on down the road of Jordan Peele's third film, Nope. I have kind of a love-hate relationship when it comes to Jordan Peele and his movies to this point. Nobody can say he is not ambitious. But I have been all over the map with these three movies. Give you a little bit of background on my reviews, my feelings on the first two Jordan Peele movies to add context as we get into his newer movie, Nope. Now, I was one of the few people out there who hated with a capital H. I know your parents tell you, don't use that word. In this day and age, I'll use that word. Hated Get Out. Hated Get Out. I thought it was a thinly veiled, reverse racism piece of garbage. I hope he got it out of his system. I hope the angry black man stuff is now gone and he can focus on just making movies that are interesting for everybody, that are creative and creepy for everybody. I don't care who he casts in his movies. We've talked about that here in the past on Sports Frenzy. Despite Disney and all the major studios trying to be woke and putting basically affirmative action into place in Hollywood, whatever. As long as they're creative, as long as the movies stay away from politics for the most part, I don't care. But the characters better be new, they better be interesting, and the stories, the plots, the scripts better be creative. And I did not think Get Out was. Now, the second movie, the follow-up, Us, I thought that was a lot better. Now, I'm not saying I thought it was a classic. I'm not saying it's one of my favorite movies of all time, but definitely a major, in my opinion, step forward for Jordan Peele. For the creepy doppelgangers floating around through this affluent neighborhood. That had a nice, creepy factor to it. And of course, for those of you who don't know, Jordan Peele hosted for 2 seasons on CBS All Access, now of course Paramount Plus, the reboot of The Twilight Zone. So again, you know Jordan Peele likes this genre. He cares about this genre. But now we get to the third most recent release from Jordan Peele called Nope. This one I kind of put in the middle between the first two. I didn't like it quite as much as Us, but it was definitely a lot better than Get Out. The thing that I didn't like about Nope, before we get into some of the things I did like, no spoilers, of course, here on Sports Frenzy, but of course we've got to discuss the plot in some kind of way. If you haven't figured it out by now, Nope is about, let's say, an alien spacecraft terrorizing a small theme park out in the desert and a nearby horse ranch. And I would say that the movie runs about 2 hours and 10 minutes. I would say the first half to 2/3 of it are pretty solid. I was a little bit puzzled by Daniel Kaluuya as the lead actor. Now, of course, he was in the first movie from Jordan Peele, Get Out. Very, very monotone, wooden portrayal of the lead character, the young man who has inherited this horse ranch from his deceased father. I don't know if he did it on purpose. I don't know if they just didn't push him or this is what Jordan Peele wanted. It wasn't the worst acting performance I've ever seen. Again, you kind of get the impression that this is what the director wanted. But it's kind of hard to root for a main character when they don't give you any emotion to invest in. Again, very robotic to a certain point. Then there's a bizarre but interesting side plot revolving around the owner of the theme park nearby. And he's played by Stephen Yeun, who, of course, we know as Glenn from The Walking Dead. He was a child actor, a child star, the character. And there was a tragic incident that happened on the set of this family comedy that he was involved in, involving a chimpanzee. And we see what happened in flashbacks. And that's the real creepy part of this movie, is that secondary storyline. Really well done. Really, in a way, terrifying. But forgive me if I've somehow missed something with this, but I don't see necessarily how the two storylines meld together. You could make, I guess, the argument that they're both stories about predatory beings, that if you push them too far or do the wrong thing, they are going to tear you to shreds. The last third of the movie kind of loses me. Number one, special effects are terrible. I don't want to go into too much detail because it would kind of give away what we're talking about in terms of the quote unquote villain or monster or bad guys in the movie. But it is bizarre. I mean, the way they portray the spaceship creature towards the end, I just found it to be really ridiculous and silly. Really silly, to be honest with you. I mean, almost laugh out loud silly. Now, you take that away, the climax is pretty good, makes sense. For the most part, how they end up taking on this entity. I really wanted to like Nope more than I did. But like I said, it seems like, number one, at times it gets too silly and goes too far over the top. The sister, Daniel Kaluuya's character, his sister, I believe the actress's name is Kiki Palmer. I could be wrong on that. Sorry. My notes are a little bit sketchy. She goes too far the other way, as opposed to what you get from Daniel Kaluuya. She goes too far over the top. She's too manic. She's too wild and crazy and screaming and yelling, in my opinion. Yes, at least she gives you some passion, some energy. But again, when your main characters really aren't all that likable, do you really care what happens to them? And then again, I said special effects get really weird and silly towards the end. But the build-up is very well done. It's interesting. I can't recommend Nope, but I'll give it a strong 2 Frenzies, which is just below my recommendation line. If you choose to watch it, if you're a bigger fan of his movies than I am, then you'll probably like it. All right, movie news. Some topics to discuss. Amazon has announced that they are going to start pushing into more major theatrical releases. They say they're committing to 8 to 10 theatrical releases per year in the future. $1 billion committed to those movies each and every year. So obviously, because of COVID, the pandemic, and the failed experiment with HBO Max, and of course Peacock with the last 2 Halloween movies, the big movie studios are realizing, yes, I think we can start counting Amazon and Netflix as big movie studios, that the best way to go, while you want to keep, if you're Amazon and Netflix, your streaming services viable, and you could say the same thing about Warner Brothers with HBO Max, Paramount obviously with Paramount Plus, etc., that the money they bring in and the relationships they have with the theatrical distributors and the exhibitors is so valuable, and the money that can come from a successful release in the theaters is still so significant, that I think we've probably seen the end of the whole hybrid release model where things get put in theaters day and date along with their streaming debuts. Now, I do like the way things have been going here recently over the last year or so, like with Nope, for instance. I completely understand where they're coming from in terms of trying to make money through releasing movies in the theaters first. But I also like the fact that the windows have shrunk from when a movie hits the theaters versus when it hits streaming. So those of us who don't go to the theaters all that often, we don't have to wait too awfully long to see these big movies come out on Peacock or Paramount Plus or HBO Max. And I think that's the proper juggling act. I think that's the proper way to do things. Again, I completely understand putting something out into the theaters on the same day you're going to open it up on a streaming service isn't the best business model. Some movies that I've been keeping an eye on that appeal to Dave and myself. We've been looking forward to Liam Neeson playing the classic detective Philip Marlowe in Marlowe, based on The Black-Eyed Blonde. It's been pushed back. We still see this a lot. Repercussions of the whole COVID mess on the West Coast and in other places, delaying production. So now Marlowe will not be out in theaters until February the 3rd of 2023. Steven Spielberg has been talking about revamping, rebooting, remaking the classic Steve McQueen action film Bullitt. Well, now he has found his lead detective, the main character, Bradley Cooper. Looks like he is signing on to play Bullitt. This is one of those few times where a remake or a reboot doesn't bother me all that much because while I appreciate Bullet, the original again with Steve McQueen, it wasn't the be-all end-all to me that it was to other people. So I'd kind of like to see a different take on it. And if they could redo The Magnificent Seven and make it work, why not Bullet? And then another classic action film. Looks like it might be on the road to a reboot. Escape from New York, another one that's been rumored for years and years and years. Looks like finally a reboot of Escape from New York is a go, and it looks like in some way, shape, or form, they are bringing back Kurt Russell. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a limited role. Obviously, he'll play Snake Plissken. It would be pathetic if he didn't. Maybe we're going to see something like we saw with Harrison Ford in the latest Blade Runner movie, where he kind of passes the torch, makes a smaller appearance, a cameo almost. So we'll see. A little less optimistic about Escape from New York than I am about Steven Spielberg redoing Bullet. And then finally, excuse me, some sad news. Kind of could have worked this in with TV and streaming, but Chris Hemsworth, we all know him as Thor from the Marvel movies. Of course, was in the fantastic Netflix movie Extraction. Supposedly, we've got the sequel to that coming at some point soon. Chris Hemsworth was doing a series for National Geographic, Nat Geo, of course, part of the Disney Plus streaming platform. I believe the show was called Limitless, where he in real life would push himself with a series of physical challenges, mental challenges, and it turns out in one episode, he ended up undergoing the most extensive blood test possible, my understanding is, where they looked at everything when it came to his blood work. And now, unfortunately for Chris Hemsworth, it came back that he has 10 times the normal disposition for developing Alzheimer's disease later on in life. And as it would with anybody, it shook him up a bit. So Chris Hemsworth is taking a break from acting right now to be with family, to try to digest this, to try to figure out next steps. There are ways, according to doctors, that you can take steps to hold this off, to keep it at bay so it doesn't develop. But just a little bit of sad news from one of our favorite movie stars here on Sports Frenzy, Chris Hemsworth. And that'll do it for your movie news and movie reviews of the week. As I mentioned, Dave will have to play catch up with Nope. He'll give you his review in the next week or two. I know I will have a review of the Paramount Plus horror film, big hit in theaters recently. Another example, like I was saying, of a smaller window where once a movie kind of peters out at the box office within 8 to 10 weeks, it hits the streaming platforms. So Paramount Plus now has the very popular horror movie Smile. I will have a review of that for you next week. Now, of course, we've got a lot to talk about with TV and streaming. Lots of discussion points. Unfortunately, we've got quite a few moments of silence to go through. And, of course, a trio of dumbasses. So, should have a jam-packed final weekend edition segment for you here, kids. Quick promo, and I will be right back.
In the fortress of solitary justice, two brave men hold the fate of the sports world in their hands, with the utterance of a single word: Frenzy! These seemingly ordinary men become the Maestro and the Conquistador, destined to save the world from stupidity on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Apple, and all noble podcast hosts everywhere. Dave and Kev stand for truth, justice, and the frenzy way.
All right, kids, welcome back. Third and final segment here on the weekend edition Sports Frenzy 2.0. I'm the Maestro going it solo this week. This, of course, hits Saturday morning, every Saturday morning, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This particular episode, November the 26th, 2022. We've covered music. We've covered movies. Now it's time for TV and streaming. Now, some of the shows that we have been talking about, what we like to call our regular reviews, where we go week by week, episode by episode. Of course, the Titans are through 4 episodes as I tape this on Thanksgiving. I believe the 5th episode of season 4 just hits today. And of course, as we've talked about here recently, season 4 features Lex Luthor, but more so Mother Mayhem and eventually Brother Blood. We even get a guest appearance. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen episode 4 yet, but we get a guest appearance in a way of one of the Titans' biggest enemies. Now, I will say this. I'm not going to go into detail about each and every episode and the plot there, but as the episodes get released, giving you a general overview, a general feel, this is probably right now, and again, great show. One of those shows where even when it's a little bit off or it's having a little bit of a down season, still better than most of the other crap out there. But this is probably, to this point, arguably the weakest Titans season to date. Now, it did start off fantastic. Episode 1 was just wild in a good way. But now it's kind of settled into a rut, in my opinion, a little bit. Here as we're 4 episodes in. I'm not the biggest fan of this storyline with Mother Mayhem. Doesn't really do much for me. One of the weaker villains they could have put up against the Titans. And we mentioned this in the past as well. I don't want to get too excited about this or get too far into the series because they're going to split it. So I believe we're going to get 6 episodes here of Titans before they hold off on the second part of season 4. And then right when they do that, we're going to switch over and they're going to start up Doom Patrol and do the same thing with season 4 of Doom Patrol. Again, beating a dead horse. We've talked about this week after week after week. And please don't call PETA on me because I said I was beating a dead horse. God knows I don't want those snowflakes on my tail. Not a fan of this. Not a fan of splitting seasons. We just talked about the fact that Resident Alien, one of the better shows on TV on the Sci-Fi Network, just cut their season 3 order down. And I believe it's because they split season 2. They hurt the ratings. People did not want to come back for part 2 of season 2, mainly because it'd been months and months and months. They'd forgotten the plot lines. They didn't want to rewatch part 1 again. You lose the momentum. You lose the interest of your audience when you do this. Look at The Walking Dead. Look at how many times they split up the seasons of The Walking Dead, which of course just ended here recently. I gave up on it. I'll admit it. I believe it was by the time they got to season 8, I was just done and over with the whole thing. Now, there's other factors involved. I think once you lost Rick Grimes in The Walking Dead, I think a lot of people not having that main protagonist. Yes, you still had Daryl, you still had Michonne, but I digress. I'm just worried that the same thing that happened to The Walking Dead happened with Resident Alien is going to happen with Titans and Doom Patrol. Now, of course, we're into season 5 on Yellowstone. Fun story showcasing the generation gap. Had lunch with my 21-year-old daughter the other day. Mentioned Yellowstone and happened to mention Kevin Costner stars in it. She just looked at me with a blank stare and said, "Who's that?" She had to look him up on IMDb, saw his picture, said, "Nope, don't know who that is." She went through his film credits, and the only one that she recognized was when he played the elder Kent, Clark Kent's adopted father, in Man of Steel. And then, of course, to end the conversation, she said, "Yeah, and I hated that movie anyway," so. Kind of boggles my mind that the younger generation doesn't know who Kevin Costner is. But I also told my daughter, Yellowstone's not marketed for the younger generation. Yellowstone is for the older generation. People like me. People who like the Western feel of it. People who like Kevin Costner. People who miss the old soapy dynamics of shows like Dallas and Falcon's Crest. I did watch Dallas. I will admit to that. I did not watch Dynasty. I did not watch Falcon's Crest, but I did watch Dallas. But Yellowstone, of course, has those shows at its core, at its heart. But of course, a little bit edgier, a little bit rougher, a little bit more violent, and of course, language. Language. Which, of course, I don't mind. Sports Frenzy's explicit because we do like to drop the F-bomb on occasion, along with some raunchy jokes. So I can appreciate, especially Beth, her language, the things she says. She is still to this day, arguably, the most hideously evil character I think I've ever seen in a TV show. But so far, season 5, chugging right along. 3 episodes in, it is still solid, still great, as the Dutton family continues to try to keep people from stealing their land, from trying to develop airports and malls and ski resorts around their land. Now, of course, Taylor Sheridan is the mastermind behind Yellowstone. And I mentioned last week his latest show on Paramount Plus with Sylvester Stallone is Tulsa King. Again, I like Taylor Sheridan. I like the dialogue him and his writers come up with. I like the plot lines. Again, these shows, of course, you can throw the Mayor of Kingstown in there as well, and all the prequel series for Yellowstone. They're marketed more to people of my age, 40s, 50s, 60s. Tulsa King, of course, stars Sylvester Stallone as a mafia capo who just got out of jail after 25 years and is unceremoniously dumped in Tulsa, Oklahoma to try to establish a criminal empire. And watching his character do this, at least over the first 2 episodes, is fantastic. The dynamic is great. And of course, one of the main businesses he's trying to get into, take protection money for, and improve the cash flow for, is the marijuana business. So seeing Sylvester Stallone smoking pot is a little bit hysterical and a little bit comical. But Tulsa King is another solid show that you should be checking out if you have access to Paramount Plus. Going back to my daughter. Again, she's in town for Thanksgiving break, for college. She's been pestering me to watch The White Lotus on HBO Max. And I've held off and I've held off. I know it's getting accolades all over the place. Emmy Award nominations. Everybody praises it, loves it. Number one, when I saw Jennifer Coolidge is in it, I immediately said, oh, God, no, please, God, no. I can't stand Jennifer Coolidge. I can't stand the old dumb blonde routine that she pulls each and every role she has. I still remember, what was it, last year or earlier this year, those terrible Uber Eats commercials where she's chomping on lipstick. I decided, though, I would try to partake of The White Lotus, and I've watched most of the first 2 episodes. And I got to tell you, I'm probably almost done with it. How can you enjoy a show? And I understand this is the point of the show. Of course, a whole bunch of people at a swanky resort, a chain of resorts all under the name of the White Lotus. But how can you like a show when all of the characters, I'm not kidding you, all of the characters are detestable, hideous and detestable? Maybe with the exception of, what is her name? Alexandria Daddario. Whew. Talk about the next future ex Mrs. Crane. Oh my God. She is beautiful. She's got eyes that you just get lost in. And I'm not usually an eye guy, but she has got some pretty, pretty eyes. So maybe outside of her character, every other character in the show is just awful. And I don't care what happens to them. I'd prefer it if Putin dropped a nuclear bomb on the White Lotus and just got rid of all of them. The world would be a better place. So I don't know how much longer I'm going to stick with the White Lotus. I know the second season is currently airing on HBO Max. But I don't know, even though I believe it's only 6 episodes, I don't know if I'm going to make it through the first season. There's only so many hours in the day, only so much time I've got left on this planet, and I don't know if I want to waste it watching all these awful, terrible people vacationing at the White Lotus. Now, I did discover a docu-series. I'm always intrigued, always like a good documentary or a good documentary series. Now, I'm not a Nat Geo Discovery type of guy when it comes to that stuff. That's more the conquistadors milieu. But going back to 2014 on Showtime, I found a documentary series called Seven Deadly Sins, hosted by Morgan Spurlock. Now, if you remember, Morgan Spurlock had one of the most influential documentaries of all time called Super Size Me. Of course, that was his exploration of fast food and where he went on the McDonald's diet and proceeded to start throwing up, I believe, after 3 or 4 days. So Spurlock helped to create this, host this 7-episode docuseries focusing on the 7 deadly sins. 1 sin per episode. 3 short documentary featurettes, about 10 minutes each. Real life examples of manifestations of these 7 deadly sins. And it's adult oriented. I'm not going to lie. You would figure with some of the sins involved, you might get a little bit of graphic material, and you do. It's not over the top like X-rated stuff, but it's R-rated material. There is some nudity, there is some sexuality, there is violence. But I'm about halfway through it, and I find this to be fascinating. Now, not all of the little featurettes are as good as the others. Some are outstanding and creepy and disturbing. Others are just kind of, why do I care? If this person or these people want to destroy their lives in this way, what harm is it doing me? But if you have access to Showtime and you haven't checked this out, like I said, this goes back about 8 years to 2014. I highly recommend you give 7 Deadly Sins a try. Real quick, a little bit of streaming and TV news. The biggest hit movie of the year, Top Gun Maverick, coming to Paramount Plus December the 22nd. So if you're like me, you're one of the few people out there who hasn't had a chance to see it yet, you're going to have your chance at the end of December on Paramount Plus. And of course, you guys know I can't stand reality television. I hate it with a passion. Different from documentaries. Now, reality television to me is completely different. And I hate to say it, I was kind of happy to see one of the biggest reality star couples, Todd and Julie Chrisley, sentenced to federal prison for tax evasion. He gets 12 years, she gets 7. Every time I'd see the commercials pop on USA Network for that show, I would just sit there, stare at the screen in stunned amazement that there are actually people out there that watched these idiots and their children. So I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit of a guilty pleasure here with the Chrisleys going to jail. Oh, and by the way, that means the show goes bye-bye. So one less reality show, a good thing for society, a good thing for America. All right, time to move on to our moments of silence. First up, Kimberly Herron passed away here recently. If you grew up in the 80s, as I did, you would know Kimberly Herron as she was one of the models, one of the prominent models in the classic ZZ Top video clip on MTV for the song Legs. Thoughts and prayers to Kimberly Herron, friends, and family. Again, a little bit of a nostalgia trip, of course, when we're dealing with moments of silence. For the most part, it usually is a look back. Jason David Frank. If you remember the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which were huge in the 90s, he started off as the green Power Ranger, eventually turned into the white Power Ranger. I understand the cultural impact of the show. I just never really watched it myself. But I do, again, recognize how important to pop culture and how popular the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers were. So thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of Jason David Frank. Now, I did watch Supernatural, and so sad to hear that Nikki Acox passed away. She played Meg Masters for a time on Supernatural. James Winburn, a stuntman on the classic movie Halloween. And then finally, Mickey Kuhn, the last surviving cast member of what some on the older generation still insist is the greatest, most popular movie of all time. And if you look at the numbers adjusted for inflation, an argument can be made. Mickey Kuhn was the last surviving cast member of Gone with the Wind. Thoughts and prayers to everybody on our moments of silence this week, their friends, their families, their loved ones. Now, of course, is the time, as the conquistador would say, when we pivot. The classic line from Ross Geller on Friends. Moving on to the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week in the entertainment world. Of course, we do this for the sports world earlier in the week, and on the weekend, it's celebrities. And there's usually not a scarcity of idiotic people coming out of Hollywood. First up, Aquaman, Jason Momoa. Mr. Momoa has been campaigning hard against plastic water bottles. In and of itself, that's fine. That's a noble cause. Yes, you see horrifying pictures of the mounds and the mounds of plastic water bottles littering reefs, beaches, islands. So in and of itself, you're going, Maestro, why does this make him a dumbass? Well, it turns out, number one, that his intentions aren't completely noble because he owns a water company that puts their water in aluminum cans. So, of course, he wants you to stay away from plastic water bottles. He wants you to buy the water from his company in aluminum cans. That's part one. Part two is the fact that if you do your research, aluminum cans are far more devastating to the environment. At least this is what some of the research shows. Aluminum cans are far more devastating to the environment than plastic water bottles, especially at the beginning. Now, we're not talking about the recycling on the back end. We're talking about what it takes to create an aluminum can and the impact that has on the environment, the procuring, the mining of the metals needed. So, Jason Momoa, you are a hypocrite and you are a dumbass. Oh, my favorite from the rock and roll world. Actually, I have two from music this week. But of course, Neil Young seems to pop up here a lot in our weekend edition on the dumbasses of the week. Neil Young's another one of these hippy-dippy old school rockers who thinks he's smarter than you. He's smarter than me. He's smarter than all of us. Just because he can write music that a lot of us don't even like. Now Neil Young says when he goes out on tour again, he will not go to any venue that is supplied by quote-unquote factory farms. Mr. Young is not a realist, number one. What it takes to feed millions and millions and billions of people, you can complain about it. We all say we don't want to know how the sausage is made. But when it comes time for a summer cookout and the brats, the Johnsonville sausage on the grill, smelling good, we're not really worried about the ethical concerns behind how the food was made. And in a way, I understand that's cruel. It's short-sighted, but it's a fact of reality. If we're going to feed people, you're not going to be able to be gentle and kind to the animals that we are going to feed on. There are costs involved, cost effectiveness. I know I sound like a cruel capitalist, but it's just not feasible to cuddle and love and care for and humanely process each and every animal that it takes to feed all of the people in the United States and the world at large. So Neil Young can be a hippy-dippy and rant and rave about factory farms, but reality will set in when he realizes, number one, he's not a businessman. He doesn't know what he's talking about beyond being a hippy-dippy. And then he's really going to look like a dumbass when nobody goes to see his shows at the very few exclusive venues where all you can get is a vegan burger and you can't have a hot dog or a bratwurst because it wasn't created and processed to Neil Young's satisfaction. Dumbass. Then finally, you know I like Bush. Sorry, I know that came out wrong. It's a little funny though. I do like Bush. Talking about the band Bush, we reviewed The Art of Survival, their new album a few weeks ago. And while Dave didn't like it all that much, I thought it was great. But of course, the leader, the singer for Bush is Gavin Rossdale, formerly married to Gwen Stefani. Of course, he had to chime in on the whole Taylor Swift Ticketmaster mess. You guys know I ripped on Bruce Springsteen recently because of his pathetic, immature response. Well, Gavin Rossdale almost had to try to one-up Bruce Springsteen on the dumbass scale. When he was asked about the mess with Ticketmaster, he said, quote, "It's exciting. Everybody wants to crash the servers." Again, like Neil Young, out of touch celebrity, out of touch idiot, out of touch dumbass. So you don't care about the stress and the problems that ensue when somebody, quote unquote, crashes the server. I know he's talking about being so immensely popular that you bring the system down. I get that. But if you read into what he's really saying, he doesn't care about the fans. He doesn't care about people being able to easily and affordably get tickets. All he cares about is ego. All he cares about is being big enough to destroy Ticketmaster in terms of their systems. It's very short-sighted. Again, it is very arrogant. And especially when you consider the fact Bush is not crashing Ticketmaster anytime soon. Gavin Rossdale is a dumbass. All right, kids, that's going to do it for the weekend edition. Thanks for checking it out with me. We'll be back next week. Hopefully the Conquistador will be back. If not, you'll get me solo for one more week. Take care. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. See you next week.